everyone, and welcome to our webinar on our latest multifamily offering, Encore's Lower Broadway. A big thank you to everyone who has joined us live and those of you who are viewing the offering through our replay. So for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Nili Jaisingani. I am the Senior Managing Director of Ignite Investments, and I'm joined by video today by our sponsor company, Encore Enterprises, Chairman and Founder, Dr. Bharat Singhani, the President of the Encore Multifamily team, Mr. Charlie Keels, and his right-hand woman, Ms. Angela Hill, our Senior Vice President on the Encore Multifamily team. With that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Singhani. Doc, could you give us your thoughts about this opportunity, as well as why you think now is the right time to go forward with Encore Lower Broadway?
This is Charlie and Angela's show, and I surely don't want to take the thunder away from them. So they really worked hard on this project, and they truly deserve compliments and congratulations to pull this together. It has not been an easy task. Just to answer your simple question, this is the largest multifamily project Encore has ever done, and as of today. So it's a very special project for us, and we would not have even thought of taking this kind of risk if we didn't think this was going to be a very, very strong project for us. Like any other real estate, location, location, location. There are three major reasons you want to do a deal. And when you guys start showing our investors what location this is, it'll become no-brainer. I mean, the clientele is already built in. There's so much demand out there, and on top of that, there is a few $1 billion worth of business coming in. And whether it comes or doesn't, it really doesn't matter. We're going in with what we have there. The demand is good enough for this location to make it work. After location, more than real estate, anything, and people who are in the stock market, they know very well, is timing. The COVID, we restricted the business, we created the debacle that we are facing today. And then as soon as that vaccine is available, as soon as we have a way out of this thing, there will be a good days are out there. So other side is very clean. There's no haziness of the other side. The question is only is when and not if. But regardless of it is, if it's going to take by the time you put everything together a couple of years from now, the weak players probably will be out. They just can't compete in this environment. The debt is not out there. The equity is difficult to find. So we'll have far less competition over the next period of time. And in 2 years gives us enough time where the supply and demand theory will be in our favor. So and you can see it's a beautiful looking building. Obviously, it's going to serve a very special group of people, and not a very usual Class A multifamily occupiers. But I'm going to let Charlie and Angela talk more about it. So overall, I'm very pleased. This is probably one of the top level project that Encore has ever offered. And we also have a few institutions already talking about coming in. So, and Nili, you always get upset with me when the institutions come and take a big chunk. But I only recommend that as quickly as possible, get your share in this lockdown, so I can cut down the institutional participation if there is a huge, bigger interest. So I'll just shut up at this point and hand it back over to you.
Doc, thank you so much for your thoughts, and you stole my thunder. I was going to mention that, you know, we had a conversation with both Doc and Charlie at Ignite and begged them at Encore to be able to give our investors an opportunity to invest in this project, because it very well could have gone to an institution. And so we're just thankful to have that opportunity and be able to have the first look and chance to present this to our investors. So before I get too much into the details of everything, I'm going to share with you a video that was created by our very own Senior Associate of Digital Media, Richard Wynn. This video should give you a great high-level feel of the location and why we found the project so compelling.
Welcome to San Antonio, home of the Alamo, the world-famous Riverwalk, and soon, Encore's latest offering, Encore Lower Broadway. Encore Lower Broadway is a 5-story, 386-unit, Class A apartment development within walking distance of the Pearl District in San Antonio, Texas. Located within 2 miles of downtown San Antonio, the site is adjacent to the Broadway East master-planned mixed-use development, anticipated to feature more than 700,000 square feet of office space and 200,000 square feet of high-end retail, a planned W hotel, public parking, as well as other lifestyle amenities. Here is the future site of Encore Lower Broadway. It will benefit from its walkability and proximity to highway traffic, shopping, restaurants, recreation, and offices. Sourced off-market as a result of the success of Encore SoFlo Apartments, Encore's multifamily development less than 3 miles south of the site, Encore Lower Broadway is designed with demand for luxury in mind. Similar to Encore SoFlo, the property will feature high-end finishes, resort-style amenities, and a private roof deck. Encore Lower Broadway is about a 10-minute walk from the Pearl District, named by Condé Nast Traveler as the San Antonio neighborhood you need to visit. Formerly a brewery, the Pearl has been revitalized into a pedestrian and bike-friendly community located along the San Antonio Riverwalk and features boutique shops, dining, a riverside amphitheater, and a 2-acre park hosting a twice-weekly farmers market and year-round free programming. The Pearl District attracts more than 30,000 visitors weekly. Progress is underway on the Broadway East mixed-use development adjacent to the Encore Lower Broadway site, with strong leasing activity for Phase 1. With more than 700,000 square feet projected for high-end retail, office, and recreational tenants, Encore Lower Broadway is poised to attract a professional renter demographic. An additional 650,000 square feet of office space abutting the project is under construction by nearby developers for Bank of America, Credit Human, and Jefferson Bank. Designed to attract young professionals, Encore Lower Broadway's walkability and premier location amidst strong demand drivers position it to succeed throughout various market conditions, with potential for positive spread between cap-on-cost and exit cap rates and high prospects for continued rent growth.
Okay, well, I hope everyone enjoyed that video. It will also be available in the data room for viewing after the webinar. So I will now hand off the presentation to Charlie Keels, who will provide a very high-level overview of what we like about the key demographics of the San Antonio MSA, as well as the specific location of the site.
Thanks, Neely, and thank you everyone for joining us on the call today. We first want to talk about the San Antonio MSA at a macro level, and this is our third project in San Antonio, so we know third multifamily project in San Antonio. We know the market well. As you just saw in the video, we have another project that's in lease up and is doing tremendously well about 3 miles south in the southern portion of the CBD. And this site is just right outside the CBD in an area we call Midtown. Overall, I'll just mention some anecdotal highlights on the San Antonio MSA for people that aren't familiar with it. Based on 1Q 2020, gross metro product was about 125.7 billion, ranking at 34th nationally and 4th in Texas, obviously behind San Antonio, Dallas, and the Austin markets. Overall, the cumulative employment growth has been 28.4% since 2010 versus 17.4% annually. Largest employers are the military, with 70,000 servicemen stationed at many military bases across the city. Actually, one that backs right up to our site, Fort Sam Houston. So all these weathered the BRAC realignment and are there to stay. And we actually have a good amount of servicemen that are renting at some of the higher rents at our Encore SoFlo project.
Can we address the dip in this graph right here that we see in 2020?
Sure. I mean, we're seeing that, first of all, across every market we're in. I mean, we're leasing up projects from Phoenix, Texas. We have projects under construction in Florida. So mainly in the Sun Belt. I think a lot of our investor base knows where we operate on the multifamily side, but this is not specific to San Antonio. We will say the type of product that we build is, especially for this project, the tenant profile that we're attracting, we're not seeing it affected really by the dip. This is more of I know Doc will probably want to talk about it later. We're seeing it more of the front-facing retail type of employee that is really not going to be who we're our tenant profile on this type of project anyhow. For instance, our collections that we've through June 10th of last month, we collected as a portfolio almost 97.9% of our total billable rents were collected. So actually, that is up, slightly up from 2019, if you can believe that, from our same period, same time in June of 2019. So we're not seeing a direct hit as far as collections. The only thing that we are seeing is our rents have flattened out in a certain amount of time. We are waiting on a little bit for rent increases, but we do expect that to subside. Riding on what Doc was saying, we do think that this is going to slow the supply pipeline, not only in San Antonio, but in other markets. It's going to create a lot of pent-up demand. I mean, this is the time you're going to be wanting to start a project. You're going to have a snowball effect for demand because there's not going to be a lot of projects. I mean, we have a project in Phoenix that's in lease up right now. Some of the investors on this call might be in. Through June 22nd, we signed 32 leases at above pro forma rents through the month of June, if you can believe that. And we still have 10 days, roughly 9 days to go, or 8 days to go. But it's nothing we're not seeing across the country. Neither we expect it to. I don't know if we expect it to be a sharp V, but we expect it to definitely rebound by the time we're leasing up.
Well, that's perfect. No, and I think you addressed quite a few of the points on this slide as well in regards to the rent growth that we're seeing in San Antonio, as well as the supply and demand.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about San Antonio overall. Like I said, we had fairly good experience in the San Antonio market, and the San Antonio market is actually a little bit different from some of your other Texas primary markets. For instance, Austin, just an hour up 35. It's much different. It's not going to have your peaks in rent growth. In the good times, you're not going to be able to push rents nearly as fast and as aggressive in San Antonio compared to Austin, but also it's not going to have the valleys. So what we've seen overall, it's a pretty steady Eddie market. And I mean, you'll see that historically since 2010, the rent growth has averaged around 2.1%. So it's not had a lot of dips that we've seen in some of the other markets when they got oversupplied in some pockets.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think we can then jump right into the specifics of the offering and talk more about the location. So this first graphic, Charlie, let's just speak to our investors really briefly about what they see on screen here, and then I'll switch right into the Google Maps presentation.
Sure. So you have 35 north and 281. So 281 is north-south, 35 north right here. It's really east-west right here, but it does end up going north. So really in San Antonio, in my mind, this is where you want to be. The Pearl District, which we'll really get into later on in the presentation, is definitely the happening spot in all of San Antonio. It's been developed over the past 10 plus years. And this is the bullseye. In the multifamily world, in my world, if you draw a ring around San Antonio, this is right in the bullseye. This is where you want to be. You're really creating a walkable district, even more. It's walkable now, which even more so whenever we have the Broadway East master plan that goes in. And on the video, everybody saw the office buildings that were. I mean, these aren't to be planned office buildings that you hear about all the time. There's 650,000 square foot office under construction now, and big names: Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Credit Human. Credit Human is the old San Antonio Credit Union for people that aren't familiar with that. They rebranded a few years ago. Then Jefferson Bank. So this has become a little financial hub, not only for parts of San Antonio, but also the Bank of America. Merrill Lynch is also their Mexican national wealth office, Southern wealth office. So they're pulling a lot of clients from northern Mexico up into this area, and by far the highest rents in the area as well. Which will, I mean, there's rents in the Pearl District that they're getting almost $3,000 a unit, which is pretty mind-boggling. I mean, we definitely didn't think that San Antonio had that depth of rental level, and we definitely proved wrong.
No, absolutely, and thank you, Charlie, for that color. And I just, while you were talking, switched over to the Google Maps presentation.
Sure.
To your point, the site is the marker with the star and the blue placeholder. And so you really hit the nail on the head by saying that this was the bullseye of the outer ring of all of San Antonio. And then I want to give investors just a relative feel of what we were able to develop with Encore SoFlo. Of course, this looks like it's under construction, but it's probably an older Google Map capture. But could you speak to the area in which we're seeing right now with Encore SoFlo
Sure.
in relative terms to our site?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is in the very southern portion of the Central Business District. Definitely a much different submarket. This really drafts off of a submarket called Southtown. One of the big demand generators here is HEB's campus and the new HEB grocery store. That for people that are not familiar with HEB, it's one of the largest privately owned companies in the United States. Their headquarters is right across the street from Encore SoFlo, and they're based obviously based in San Antonio. They're for people that are from Dallas, even though we don't have a lot of HEBs, their hiring brand is the Central Market brand, which I'm sure a lot of people have been to. But we were able to acquire a full city block here on the southern quadrant of downtown, right across from HEB's headquarters. A little over 3 acres. It was actually 3.38 acres, and we're developing a 5-story wrap, is what we call it, with a parking deck, a 6.5-story parking deck, 339 units. In lease up now, we're about halfway there. We expect to lease up probably until end of this year.
Thanks, Charlie. And I just zoomed us out very briefly so that people could see SoFlo in relation to all of downtown as we move further north. And then now tracking up north north of the highway, I've zoomed us into the Pearl District, which I know that we're going to review in further detail. And you can see the Riverwalk coming right up to the left of the Pearl District. And another thing that I wanted to focus on is now zooming us into Alamo Heights. So I wanted you to give investors the opportunity to understand why Alamo Heights is relevant to our project and why we wanted to point it out on the webinar today.
Sure. I mean, Alamo Heights is the Highland Park of Houston, the River Oaks. The Highland Park of Dallas, the River Oaks of Houston. It is the higher income neighborhood, and actually it's very similar to those neighborhoods. They have their own school district. And although we're not in Alamo Heights, we are right up the road from that. Broadway is it's a north-south road that runs very far south and very far north that is very well traveled, which is our site is right off of. And actually the Central Market that I just mentioned, Neely, that's actually the closest grocery store, which is just a few miles north of Broadway into the Alamo Heights neighborhood. And obviously Central Market's only in very high demographic areas, which is really what we're chasing from a renter base.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, we have going further south of Alamo Heights, Lower Broadway, and I've set the view to where Lower Broadway is not quite in the center of the screen, but to give you a sense of its proximity to what we were doing previously before I entered Google Maps, the Pearl District, as well as Bank of America and Credit Human, that is this yellow place marker right in the center of the site. So, any other comments, Charlie?
Yeah, the one thing I want to point out here, Neely, and it showed up on the video. I just want to make sure everybody caught it. If you look at this map, you'll think that, well, you have this major interstate here that's a dividing line between our site and what's going to be Broadway East over here in the Pearl District. Well, this is elevated, and actually the parking for the Pearl is all underneath this interstate, so you can walk under there. So it shows up on the video. I'll invite everybody to go take a look at it where you can really see that. So it is completely walkable, and from our site and our to be built development to, I mean, depending on if you hit the lights perfectly, you can get there in 5 minutes. You know, on the with an outside time, I'd say 10 minutes. And Angel, why don't you talk about the Pearl a little bit? Just what you think. I mean, it's such a unique development for people that haven't been there.
It is a very unique pedestrian friendly environment. It has a central green and restaurants and localized retail. So it's a very family friendly environment to go and grab a bite to eat and wander around and go to the shops. And, you know, there's entertainment, there's restaurants, and connectivity wise, it's a very simple walk to Lower Broadway, very easy walk, especially if you're parking under the freeway. So, you know, I think once you cross over into the Lower Broadway development, we have more national type retail tenants, or will in the future. So it's sort of the big brother to the Pearl, or the modern cousin, if you want to call it that. Whereas the Pearl is smaller, more localized mom and pop type retail. And the developers, and Charlie will allude to this a little bit further probably, but they wanted to keep it that way, so that you can see by the list of clients or retail tenants, they're more localized type tenant base. So,
right. And I'll jump in there, Angela. So that for people that don't know the history of the Pearl, it was bought by a billionaire in San Antonio named Kit Goldsberry. He sold paste pecani sauce to Campbell Foods in the late 90s and really built this as a way to give back to San Antonio. And it is a first-class development. This is a kept all national tenants out. You know, there's a story that a Kimpton Hotel wanted to go into as a hotel in there, but he thought that was too much of a boutique. I don't know if anybody's ever stayed at a Kimpton Hotel, but I think it's about as boutique as it gets. So you won't find any national retailers in here. And without the Pearl, in all honesty, there is no Lower Broadway East. It created the demand for all of these higher end tenants that are national tenants that want to go over to Lower Broadway East, which really creates what we're drafting off of, which is the jobs, the office buildings that are being built there, the existing retail and nightlife that's on the ground of the Pearl, and then the to be built that will be built in Lower Broadway East, which we'll talk about here shortly. Or now.
Yes, I've switched you right to it, Charlie.
Perfect. So the Lower Broadway East development, we were invited or contacted, I guess, if you will, by the master developer of this project that they've been working on for the past, I would say, 5 to 7 years. They've been assembling this land and entitling it all, and that's actually who we're buying and contracted our site from. So this is modeled after Legacy West. If up here up in Plano, if anybody's familiar with that, actually it has a lot of the same team members, not all the same team members, but a lot of the same team members. The plan is to bring a lot of those national tenants, the Lululemon, Peter Millar, True Food Kitchens, Williams Sonoma, those type of tenants that want to be in the Pearl, want to be in this urban setting, this walkable that and draft off this environment created by the Pearl, but the Pearl just won't let them in really. So they created and signed, and actually they have the same tenant rep broker as Legacy West that represents a lot of these tenants that have come in. The capitalization behind this project is actually Texas Teachers is the financial partner to the developer through a financial Invesco is actually the financial intermediary through a separate account, Texas Teachers. So some very, very well capitalized groups that are putting this project together. It's all office and retail. These are just some of the tenants. They even mentioned to me here recently that they just recently signed a 90,000 square foot office tenant They can't disclose the name of it yet, but they will soon. In this wild market, they just signed that last week, if you can believe that. Some additional leases, they signed Yeti a few weeks ago. That's not showing up here. So lots of the same tenants that you'll see in Legacy West, not all of them, but a lot of them that are here. And so you have this central green here that you see right here in the middle with the food hall concept behind it. Actually, the same food hall operator that's at Legacy West. And our apartments are going to be just to the left of the screen, but we're aligning our parking garage and rooftop deck up, which Angela will talk a little bit more, where you'll be able to look over it and see kind of the focal point of this overall development. And where people can sit on our patio or our rooftop deck and enjoy the concerts or whatever they might be having out there on any given evening.
Thanks, Charlie. And we actually had an investor question come in, and thank you everyone for submitting your investor questions. I have noticed some folks have spoken about audio issues. We apologize for that inconvenience. If you could just please log out and log back into the webinar, hopefully that helps a little bit. But to address the current investor question, Charlie, are there any historical buildings in this area that could possibly be an issue for this development?
Yeah. I'll actually let Angela handle that one, but go ahead, Angela.
Specific to our site, there are no historical buildings of any kind for us to be concerned about. As part of our due diligence on the site, we did work with the Office of Historic Preservation to ensure that none of the existing structures were going to pose a problem to the site for future development.
Okay, perfect. And with that, we can jump right into more details about the project. I know we've reviewed this, but just Charlie, could we review it once more to give people a very high level understanding of the matrix?
Sure. So our total site that we have contracted is a little under 4.1 acres, but we're rounding up here. 386 units, 5 stories. It's going to be a similar parking garage, 6.5 stories, roughly 563 spaces, and we're looking at about 1,900 all-in rents across multiple unit types. This is going to be more heavily weighted towards ones, which is pretty typical in an urban area, roughly at $235 a foot rents, which, as I've mentioned, I mean, there's projects that are in the Pearl almost $3,000 that we're not, we're not trying to attain anywhere near that rental level, but we think, with or without the Broadway East, which is, we're confident that it's coming, is that we'll be able to attain these rents regardless, just because you have the live work play is there already. It's not we just need to, we're going to be right in the middle of it all, and we're really excited about the project.
Yeah, and we had actually another question about rents and how sensitive, I know you mentioned the comparable project rents, but how sensitive is this investment to rent rate stress? And do we have a break-even occupancy for the property that we model into our assumptions?
Just really the candid answer. I mean, every project has sensitivities to rent. It's just how much sensitivity, right? And we stress projects sensitivities. We stress these to the nth degree, probably too much, frankly, ad nausea, because typically we try to do 5 to 10% intervals and see. We do break-even analysis, all that good stuff. But there's a lot of variables that go into this.
Yes, and we have a question around our projections in our rental rate increases. So what are we projecting in this project that rent rates will increase from what they are today?
So it's going to be less in the front end. So with COVID-19, right? So first of all, let me back up a little bit. We have 2 third-party economists that we rely on, and then we triangulate a lot of data, and then we make our own assumptions. We rely on CoStar, which is a global real estate platform, all real estate sectors, and then Axiometrics. Axiometrics is a subsidiary of RealPage, which is really just multifamily centric. And we take a lot of their projections, and then make our own assumptions. So all in all, we're going to get it. We think it's going to average out to 2 to 3%. Now, it's not going to be, in light of COVID-19, it's not just going to be as steady as you will. I think at the beginning, there's going to be a little bit of choppiness. It might be flat for a year or two, but then I think it's going to go up 5 or 6% because you got some of the pent-up demand, and then it's going to normalize more. And not just San Antonio. I think that's going to be a lot of markets across the country.
Okay, and last investor question that I'd like to throw at you, Charlie, right now, or maybe even Doc for that matter. would a Class B property with some value add components be a better strategy versus a development at this time?
That's a very, very interesting question. And I just did a webinar yesterday for the FLIA organization, and a very similar question was asked at the same time. These are apples and oranges. The Class A, if found the right location and with a very good debt in place, would definitely do better in today's environment. If you look at every single sector of real estate, pretty much everything has been affected some way or the other, except multifamily. In multifamily also, like Charlie was talking about, the consumer facing employment has been affected the most. That is restaurants, retail, shopping centers, hospitality, etc., etc. And these are generally the lower paid jobs, and then they lost the jobs, and that has affected the collection in Class B and Class C. Class B and Class C, from the last I looked at, were around 82 to 86% collection. But Class A, the kind we do, Charlie was saying, we actually had a better month in collection last month than the month a year ago, the same time. So I do believe that the location of where it is sitting there, the millennials, the group of people who are high end, this is a billionaire's dream, the pearl, and it has really become a dream come true. And then high end customers are there, and they would only want high end situations. I'm not sure that that Class B would be a right choice here, but for this environment, Class A is probably the best. The development is even better because we're going to be out in 2 years from now. When we first started discussing, I waited to talk about this. The construction cost, even though we are talking about certain numbers here, we may get benefited because of all this weakness that is coming in the economy. We may get some benefit, although I haven't seen much yet, but I'm sure it is going to happen. So all these benefits, when you put together, I think Class A development in this particular location, in my estimation, will do a better returns. But listen, multifamily overall is a good sector to be in. So I will never say Class B would not be a good choice. I just don't think there's much around in this area, and that's why we are the experts of Class A. We are not an experts of Class B.
And Neil, I can kind of add a little bit to that. I mean, I think in the sentiment that we're seeing a lot in the value add space as it relates today is that the big pressure is just to try to get the tenants to maintain their current rent, right? And the whole investment thesis of value add is not only to maintain current rent, but it's to increase rents by 10%. And I would be a little hesitant to believe that, and this is not global, every deal is different, first of all, but I'd be a little just broad brush the Class B value add, be a little hesitant that you'd be able to implement a value add strategy of $5,000 to $10,000 a unit and increase rents 10% of this market. I think, maybe a year or two down the line, but it would make me a little bit nervous today.
No, that's very true. This is the best way to serve this area, this location, but it's a great question.
Thank you both. And Doc, you previously mentioned the type of product that millennials really like and the high-end finish out that would play well into this building. So Angela, could you give us a little bit more detail into the amenities and the design of the overall project?
Sure. And so first of all, when we look at these projects, we look at each project individually. We work very hard to not produce a cookie cutter effect because we feel that each of our tenants location is a specific market segment. And so while this one is going to be as glamorous as our SoFlo project, it will be uniquely lower Broadway. The basic amenities at this property will be similar to SoFlo in the sense that we will have a beautiful professionally designed clubhouse with a cyber cafe, if you will, or coffee area and lounge area, individual offices in the business center, which works out actually great in this current day where so many people are working from home. I'm trying to get as many individual offices in there as I can because people really like to get out of their apartments and actually use the amenity space and go take a conference call or conduct business in a private setting. This property will have several of those offices as part of the business center. We'll have the dog wash and dog park central to the project, a beautiful resort style pool, plenty of spaces to mingle and cook out and enjoy the beautiful weather. We'll have a rooftop deck that'll have a view of the Lower Broadway development, and we'll have some gaming activities. We'll have an outdoor kitchen, awesome places to hang out and have a cocktail in the evenings or visit with friends. The units themselves will have a lot of unique features in the sense that we like to try to do built-ins, a little mud room in the entries where possible, where you can hang a dog leash, hang your purse, plug in a USB, have a USB to plug in your phone if you need to charge up. And then of course, designer finishes, high-level granite countertops or quartz perhaps, but all with a very current, but classic at the same time finish, so that most people can look at the units and say, oh, I just saw that in a magazine. Because after all, we are creating homes and people like to know that what they're moving into is something that's very on trend, but also classic to stand the test of time as well.
Well, we did have a few questions, but I'm going to leave them towards the end because
Okay.
I'd really like to jump into kind of the meat of what a lot of our investors want to know, which is the deal specifics and the quantitative piece of the investment. So right before we jump into that, I wanted to briefly share, because those of you who have joined us today that have invested with us before know that Encore Multifamily, with your help, has built an impressive current portfolio of over 2,700 units, representing $500 million in assets under management. On a track record standpoint, we have realized 27 transactions with a gross IRR of 25.4% and 1.7 times multiple of invested capital. Encore Multifamily team, which includes obviously Charlie and Angela, have together more than 100 years of experience acquiring, repositioning, developing multifamily properties, and they collectively have overseen the development of over 64,000 units. We at Ignite believe that Lower Broadway is going to be an excellent addition to their current portfolio of 11 assets. And I really would like for Charlie to now go into a bit of the deal structure, particularly because we've done something that investors probably haven't seen from us before that we're really excited to introduce to you today on this webinar. So Charlie, I'll let you kind of speak to the numbers here and the sources and uses of the offering.
Yeah. So, on the left side of the screen, I'm just going to focus on one number right now, and I'll come back to the rest. We're developing to a stabilized yield of 7.1. As Doc alluded to, Class B apartments are going under contract in the 4.5 range. Listen, for this investment, if this project was on the ground now, it'd be 5-ish cap. We underwrote a 5.25 exit cap, so a nice spread between your entry cap, which is your stabilized yield, and your exit cap. Typically we try to get 100 basis points spread, 75 to 100 basis points depending on the market, so we're actually getting a much wider spread than we're used to. And then we'll flip over to the sources and uses. So a lot of our investments that people have been in the past, we typically have a senior construction loan from a bank that most people know, and then we would either have all common equity or a preferred equity piece that would bring the total leverage around to 80%. And the typical, what we call WACC, which is weighted average cost of capital, on that structure now is very fluid right now with COVID-19, but pre-COVID-19, mid-6 to 7% range, up to 80% by the time you factor in the lower cost senior construction loan, which floats to the higher cost pref equity piece. What Doc and I have been able to do is work with a publicly traded REIT and get them to give us what we call a fee simple financing loan of roughly 34.2 million at a cost of capital of low 5%, and then get layered in a construction loan to give us a loan on the leasehold interest of, which would be about LIBOR plus 300-ish. So your weighted average cost of capital is sub 6. So you're picking up roughly 100 basis points, but on a, roughly on it ends up being about $700,000 a year, roughly, over about a 4 to 5 year hold, depending on when we exit. So it ends up being a sizable amount of money that's all passed through to the investor. So, we're always looking, and for the biggest thing to point out, for not any more undue risk. So it's getting to about the same leverage standpoint, saving a lot on the weighted average cost of capital, and all that upside just passes on to the investor base. And so we're always thinking of new ways to get creative, like we've, Neely, I'm sure what you'll mention, like we've done on the HUD portfolio in the past. We're not always running with the pack. We're trying to think of new ways to create value for our investors. This is something that we've been working on. How long have we worked on this stock? A year, to finalize this structure?
Minimum 1 year.
Yeah, because it's complex, and and we're hitting the very highlights of it right now, but we're happy to walk through anybody in a little bit more detail. It sounds, and let me back up. It sounds more complex than it actually is, right? We can still collapse it anytime we want, pay it off. I think that there is a 2-year lockout on it, but there's 2-year construction fees. After that, we can collapse it whenever we want and bring traditional financing. Whenever we sell it, it collapses. So you're not going to force any new investor to take this financing on.
And Charlie, in this capital structure, who has seniority between the fee simple and the improvement lender?
The fee simple has priority over the senior lender. And so really that is the way that the cost of capital comes down. Because really what we're doing is typically you would have, like I said, your senior lender that has priority and your pref equity provider is subordinate to the senior lender. We flipped them. So we flipped the two, pushed the senior lender up in the leverage stack behind about the same pricing. So it's a pretty creative structure that lots of people are talking about stress models. We can give people encyclopedias full of stress models on this structure, but lots of modeling, but it's definitely something. I don't know how scalable it is, in all honesty. I think there's only going to be 1 or 2 of these because but we're excited to be able to pull this off on this one.
Absolutely. And Doc, can you speak a little more to the finality of this? I mean, is this the set in stone structure that we will be proceeding with? And if not, do we have a plan B? Because I know that people in this environment are concerned about lenders and their ability to finance developments such as this, given the instability of, what's going to happen going forward with COVID. So just wanted you to speak on this a little bit for our investors.
Yes, all the pieces are in place right now, but I cannot sit here and say everything is going to work out as it is. In fact, I can tell you that there will be hiccups. When you do a $100 million deal in a very, very prolific area of the town, there are going to be surprises, and this project is not immune from that either. What I can say is that you have a group of people who have been through adversities multiple times, including COVID, including Katrina, including oil spillage, including the 2008, 2009 crisis, etc., and they've found a way not to ever lose money for investor. What are the possibilities? Well, any of these things can turn around. The economy is fragile. There are lots of good news coming in, but it's still fragile. We still don't know where everything is going to settle, but we do have a backup of preferred equity. We have a backup of hard financing. So we always have a bunch of other things that we can work through this. It's a very prime project. And if you wait, and let's say we wait for another year and a half to do this, the land will not be available. And even if it was available, by that time we'll be entering into a time when we'll have tremendous competition. So we measure everything. My dad always taught me that measure twice and cut once. And then as Charlie said, Charlie gets tired of me when I make him run bunch of sensitivities, which these things I'm just a very paranoid, suspicious kind of guy and scared guy, and I want him to feel about me that way. So we would ran bunch of models. We have bunch of abilities to change the structure on this. So I feel very good about it at this point. But certainty, no, there is no certainty. But look at the 100 projects we have done in the Encore enterprise in the past. None of them had certainty, but we've never lost money.
No, I appreciate that, Doc. And on the Ignite side, we made sure to build in that optionality into the PPM. So you will see the optionality of either situation play out. And we wanted to do that to be as transparent as possible to our investors that are getting in at this earlier stage of the development process. And with that, Charlie, I wanted to ask another question about the benefits of developing in this period, namely if we've had any benefit on land price, or if you foresee any additional benefits in the future due to COVID or other issues.
Sure. So, yeah, we'll talk about land first. So I'll tell you that we've been working on this project for quite a long time. We have been successful in negotiating a $3.2 million price discount from our original contract price to where we're at now, which is roughly 20%. Some of that is baked into the cost you see here. Some of it isn't. Our final contract price is going to be $12.5 million, but we're closing quickly, which we'll get into, I think, on another slide, Neely. In addition, construction pricing. Construction pricing should come down. Like Doc said, we haven't seen a lot of it yet. I'll tell you that we think we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to get some price relief based on what we have on these numbers that you're looking at here, which is the current pricing that we had in this model is, I believe, $173.66. We have current pricing at roughly $169, which is, there's still some fluidity in that, which is a couple $1 million in savings. In addition to that, Neely, we will get some city support that is not baked in these numbers. We're going to get some sort of TIF funding, or it's actually called a TERS here, to the tune of, I think the floor is $1 million and the ceiling's $2 million. We're still in the thick of the negotiation. I think we will, our plan is to go to the TIF board by August. Hopefully we can get there. It'll be August, September, then we'll have that final number. But that's all gravy, if you will. That's none of that is baked into these numbers. We wanted to make sure the deal stood on its own at more of the conservative cost figures and without any TIF support. And actually there's some more land adjustments that need to come out of this as well.
Well, thanks, Charlie. I mean, I think the conservative model is always what we want to present to our investors and try to be as accurate as possible. And I think the last piece of this deal that we've been addressing sporadically throughout the presentation is the timeline. So can you speak to the timeline on the lower half of the screen here and what we expect to do in the coming months?
So we're closing on the land at the end of July. July 22nd is our outside date. As part of, as Doc would say, as part of negotiating a price reduction, you got to close, right? So we were able to get that done. We'll start construction 4Q of this year, which a lot of that is out of our control. We're very far along in the plans, and when I say a lot is out of control, a lot of it's just the city staff, right, to get through the permitting process. But the site is entitled from a zoning standpoint. And Angela, if I'm correct, the only entitlement we're lacking is just a building demo permit and building permits, correct?
It is. It's an entitled site, and it's just building permits and the plat approval, which we're running right now. That's concurrently as we design the project.
Right. So we would start construction fourth quarter, Neely, and then be under construction for roughly 2 years, and we'll looking at hopefully stabilizing this sometime and getting units in 2022. Sometime mid to late 2022, and stabilizing 23 is our goal. Obviously, it's to get the moving target is just the start. Hopefully we start sooner than later, but it's going to, I think, as we said at the beginning of the presentation, delivery in 2022, I think is going to be similar to delivery. I don't know if any of the investors on the call were in the Encore Maple project, but we delivered that in 2011, 2012. It's going to be pretty similar, I think, where you're going to have a lot of pent-up demand that because supply is going to subside for the most part, and we're going to be able to hopefully have the wind behind our backs during the lease up.
Perfect. Well, I want to summarize the equity needs here that are on the top half of this presentation. So if you look at the investment today, we need a total of 20.4 million in equity, of which Encore will contribute 2 million as a co-investment. And that gives Ignite the opportunity to present to investors 18.4 million of interest and ownership in the offering. We'll be presenting it to accredited investors at 100K minimum investment. And before we jump into our Q&A, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping and share with you all a bit of updates that we've made to our subscription process. I don't want to steal too much of our VP of Investor Relations, Azure Erickson's thunder here, but her and the entire team, Nami Nafisi, also part of our investor relations team, has worked so hard to deliver an upgraded subscription process to our investors. And for me personally, where this endeavor really started was a commitment to higher data security. So we wanted to understand how we could give investors the comfort to make sure that everything that they were transferring, particularly their personally identifiable information, was secure. And the first step in that process is to make sure that we take all of that process out of the email system completely. So we will no longer be transmitting our sensitive documents, including the subscription documents, the PPM, any other presentations through email, nor will we ever ask you to transmit your driver's license, trust documents, any other documents over email. It will all be done through this invitation to a data room, which you can see here on the right side of your screen. And then once you're ready to subscribe, this data room will automatically populate a viewing for a subscription package, or you'll receive an email to view the subscription package in connection with this data room. And we really feel that that's the best way to preserve investors' security and make this an overall more efficient process for everyone. So I just wanted to say that. And then with that, we've got a few minutes left. I've got a lot of questions here. First, Charlie, can you address distributions? Will there be any distributions over the life of this project?
Well, during obviously the construction period and the lease-up period, no, right? But our typical rule of thumb that we have on development deals is we stabilize the project, assess market conditions. If we think that there's going to be a big windfall, we'll market the project, sell it, and then we'll just wait to distribute then. If not, if we think it's not the right time to sell, then we might wait a year or two. And then if we're stabilized and are cash flowing like we expect, then yes, we'll distribute then between the stabilization period and exit.
Okay, perfect. And Doc, a question for you. So this offering, as Ignite is offering it, will be open for 1 year since the time we go live. So what is the benefit for an investor to invest theoretically today versus right at the end of the offering period close?
Well, the 1 year was put in because you insisted. I personally don't think it's going to stay open for 1 year. So the most important benefit is that if you wait, you may not get in. So that's number one benefit. The putting the funny part aside, the internal rate of return calculations start from the day you invest. So even though you invest today and the last person invests a year later, both will get different amount of returns dollar wise. The internal rate of return wise will be the same, but the dollar wise it will be different. Let's just say is a 15% or 18% internal rate of return, then that for that 1 year period that your money was invested, you should get 18% more money than the other person who is a year later. So it's a great way of leveraging your idle money that's sitting there, and you hope that others invest later, then you can make a lot more internal rate of return.
Thanks, Doc. The next question, I think we had a few questions on the supply side factor. So are there any other projects, Charlie or Angela, that are being developed in this area, and specifically the Class A high-end multifamily projects?
There is one other project north of the Pearl on the west side of Broadway that's proposed, a project by Embry, which is a great developer, has a great reputation. And so that is proposed. That is the only one that we're aware of as of today. Obviously, it's supply right now is very tough to track. It being what's proposed and what's actual. We expect that one to come, but we don't expect any other ones as we sit here today.
Okay, perfect. Another question we had was, how is this project in any way affected by COVID? And I know we've addressed this at some points in the presentation, but I would like to get your final thoughts on how we believe COVID might affect this project.
So COVID will help us in reduction of the construction cost. COVID will help us eliminating, if anybody was thinking of competing with us, and if they don't have the same wherewithal financially and has the debt and equity secured like what we have, they will be eliminated from the scene. And the rebound, the COVID will help when the rebound will be stronger, because a lot of pent-up demand will occur, and by that time we'll be ready to start leasing. Even though the slide you showed, the stabilization occurs in 2023, we'll be leasing the asset in 2022. So 2 years from now, we'll be leasing. So I think that these are the benefits of COVID. Although it has caused damage to the entire world, there are a few areas COVID has been helpful to Encore, and this is one of those.
Okay, and I know we're at time, so I really appreciate everyone joining, but if I can just squeeze 2 more questions in before we conclude. Doc, this one's for you. So given the massive spending by the Fed, how will exit be impacted if interest rates are much higher in 5 to 6 years?
So we have always had an issue with interest rate and what the cap rate is. And if you look at it, there are 2 thoughts of groups. One group says when the interest rates goes up, the inflation goes up, the rents go up, and even if there is a compressed, even if there's an expanded cap rate, the total dollar amount still stays the same. And the other group says, listen, if the asset is great, it really doesn't get impacted by interest rate as much, because people want it more, and they will keep compressing the interest rate, compressing the cap rate to get you the number where you need to get. So it's a very good theoretical argument. We just never had a problem selling at the price that we always thought we would be able to sell it.
Yes, and so investors know as well, as projects evolve, we have quarterly asset update calls to explain the changes in returns, IRR, and multiples, so that people can keep informed over the course of the project. As we learn, things change, you learn, things change. So I do want to mention that this is a very fluid projection, so to speak. All right. Well,
also, can I say a little funny thing before you close this $100 million serious talk?
Yes.
Okay, I won't take more than 30 seconds, but as you know, I came from India, where very rarely you have dogs in the home. There are dogs on the street. Now, my wife, Smita, was very fortunate, and she had dogs all the time. And then I came to this country, and now what I see, the multifamily that Charlie and Angela are building actually is a palace for dogs. So if you really want to see what we do for dogs in this country, this is a great project for you to look at what all facilities they have brought into this multifamily. So we are not only taking care of humans, we are also taking care of our beloved pet dogs. And since then, I became a dog lover, and I really enjoy the newer facilities.
Well, Charlie, do you have any other concluding statements before we close today?
Not really. We appreciate everybody jumping on the call. We, as you can see, we're really excited about it. This is, over a year worth of making. We appreciate everybody on this call that's invested with us in the past. And if you haven't invested with us in the past, we, thank you for getting on the webinar. And if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call.
As always, thank you so much for your time, and we hope to speak to you more about Lower Broadway very soon. Goodbye.
Thanks.